Hi, I'm Oliver Tanner. Welcome to Tanner Style. Welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're going to do something different. Now, up until now, we've kind of been trying to figure out our process for making videos. Some of our videos have been a little bit long. We're trying not to put out too many really long videos because we understand people have busy days, etc., etc., etc. But at the same time, I am trying to do some real instruction here. And it's really hard to get in real and proper instruction unless we take the time to do it. I want to make sure that you are not just watching me make something, but that you're actually learning how to do something for yourself and in your own kitchen. So today we're going to be making some pies. We're going to be doing a flaky pie crust. We're going to be making an apple pie. And then just to illustrate the principle of making any type of hot fruit pie, we're going to make something that's a little bit random. I've never made a pie like the second one that we're going to make today. So I have no clue how it's going to be. But we're basically going to illustrate and show that you can make a pie out of pretty much anything. Okay? As long as you understand the process, as long as you understand the principles upon which it's built and how to do it. We're going to break this pie making process into multiple videos. So this video that you're watching now, you should already know from the screenshot and the title, is going to be all about the crust. So come on with us and let's make some pie. All right, so crust, let's get started. So we're not gonna share the recipe for this because the recipe is kind of irrelevant, all right? Any flaky pie crust recipe you find online is gonna be fine. Any cookbook, they're all pretty much the same. There's really not much difference in any of them. All right, so we're gonna focus on process. We're gonna start out with our flour. We're gonna put that into our mixing bowl. We've got pre-measured out our salt and our sugar. Actually, we're going to do something a little bit different this time. I've never done this and I've never heard of anybody doing it, but I was just thinking about it and I was like, why not? What we're going to do is we're actually going to add some cinnamon to our pie crust just to give it a little bit of flavor. Sometimes pie crust can be a little bit boring, a little bit bland. So, I don't know, let's try mixing it up a little. The cinnamon really isn't going to do anything adverse to it. We're going to give this a whisk, kind of like a quick, rough, dirty sift. If you have a sifter, that would probably be a good idea to use it. I don't right now, and I don't have a strainer with me to do this. So a whisk is actually going to work pretty good. And you want to whisk anytime you're doing bread, cake, pie crust, whatever it is you're doing, you want to sift your ingredients. Basically what it's going to do is it's going to just break it all up, okay? Make everything nice and well mixed. You're not going to get any pockets of anything. This is going to be especially important anytime you're using something like baking soda or baking powder, because nobody wants a mouthful of that. We're not using that today, but it's good practice. All right, we've got that sifted. We're going to set it aside. Let's talk butter. All right, so I got a pound of butter here. We are just going to cut this into chunks, right? The size really doesn't matter. We're just going to kind of throw it in there. Now, I think that the recipe that we're doing actually calls for less than a pound of butter. Not a lot less, but I think it does call for a little bit less. And here is the truth about pie crust, okay, especially flaky type pie crust, because there are many different kinds of pie crust, and we will probably do some of those other different kinds of pie crust in future videos. But the truth about flaky pie crust is that you can never have too much butter. If your pie crust, if you want to just be sure about your pie crust being absolutely delicious and flaky as all get out, just add more butter. Is a good general rule of thumb to follow. I did not say it's going to make it healthier. I said it's going to make it taste better. We've got our butter in there in chunks, and now basically what we're going to do is You're gonna want to use your hands for this, okay? I know everybody loves to use their KitchenAid. The KitchenAid is so much easier to use, or whatever mixer you have. It's quicker, it's easier, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. It's also the wrong tool for this job. If you're making a flaky pie crust, the best way to do this is to do it by hand. Get your hands in there, because there's a texture that we're looking for, and you're really only gonna know when you've achieved that texture by using your hands, all right? So now you'll notice I'm not kneading it. I'm kind of grabbing it, and I'm kind of pinching it and rolling it together, okay? I do not want this to become a homogeneous mixture. I don't want this to become one solid texture and totally mixed in. I want chunks of butter in here. I want lots of chunks of butter in here, but I don't want hunks of butter, like, you know, where you're going to take a big bite and it's going to be all butter. We want this to be mixed in so that it has kind of a mealy texture, so it's, you know, kind of flaky. And if you have big flakes, that's fine. And it's only going to add to the flakiness of the dough. So here's what's going on with pie dough and why we're going to do it like we're doing it, okay, in this mealy texture. So when you put this pie dough into bake, okay, temperature in the oven is going to get high. All that butter is going to melt, and butter is composed of solids, and then there's a lot of water, a lot of liquids in your butter as well. When that butter is melting, when that pie crust is cooking, that water is going to turn to steam, and it's going to evaporate, and it's going to create these little tiny pockets inside of the crust that you're making, and that is what creates that flakiness, okay? So that flakiness, those nice crispy layers, so you know, it's gonna get a little bit of the crispiness from the fat in the butter that's cooking, and then the separation that makes the flakiness is gonna come from the steam from the water in the butter escaping. If your butter is completely homogenized and totally mixed in, that's not gonna happen, because it's gonna be coming out from everywhere. Your crust may even come, I mean, it's just gonna be kind of bland and boring. You're not gonna have those flakes that really make a pie crust over the top delicious. Let's see, let's check this out. I still got some bigger chunks, but this is actually looking pretty darn good, okay? So you can see it almost has a grainy texture, almost like cornmeal even, right? But you can see I've still got some good sized chunks of butter in there, okay? Some of these are a little bit too big, so right now I'm gonna kind of sift through it, find my really big pieces, break them up. We don't want to spend too much time on mixing pie crust, because, well, we're not trying to develop gluten in here, okay? When you knead bread and you work it and you work it and you work it, what you're doing is you're developing the gluten in there, which gives the bread structure. We don't need all that structure for pie crust. So we have our dry mix done here. So we're just gonna use water, use buttermilk at home if you want, or water. Buttermilk just adds a little bit more flavor. So we added about a half a cup of water to this. Again, we do not want to make like a serious dough with this, okay? We're just kind of tossing this around. We just want enough moisture in here for it all to hold together. Yeah, we're not quite there yet. We're gonna need a little bit more water. So we're just gonna add like a really small amount of water. We do not want a lot more water for this. We just want enough for this to hold together as a dough. We're getting a little bit closer with that. And we're just gonna keep going like this until our dough is going to hold together. While we're at this point, we also maybe should have done it a little bit earlier, but we're just gonna add just a little bit of vanilla there as well. Really don't need a lot. You may have noticed that I did not measure any of that out. It's really not needed. It's just a little bit of vanilla. As long as you're not pouring like a whole bottle of vanilla in, right? if you can just eyeball like about a teaspoon, about a half a teaspoon, whatever, then you're gonna be fine. Don't be adding like a tablespoon of vanilla because it's just not needed. There aren't really any solid rules about, you know, things like how much vanilla should you add to a pie crust, or really most anything at all. And this is kind of where, you know, following recipes is kind of silly in a lot of ways. Now, I understand a lot of people don't really understand these things, and this is why we're talking about these things, so that you do understand them. But following recipes religiously, and, well, you know, the recipe says to add exactly this, so I'm going to add exactly that, is kind of silly. It's really not needed. And I understand that before you're educated on a thing, that you just follow the directions and you just do what you're told. Okay, we're moving past that today. You're not gonna hurt anything by adding a little bit more vanilla. With baking things, a lot of times there are reasons why you have certain amounts of water, flour, all these kinds of things. But even there, the amount of hydration you have in a dough, bread dough, pie dough, whatever, is going to change based on even your elevation, your location, whatever. There are so many different factors. And so really the better thing to get, especially right now with making pie dough, is a feel and a texture and a result. We're looking for a result. We want to be smarter than a recipe. A recipe is just ink and paper. I think that our pie dough is about ready. Okay, now you'll see it's pretty much holding together. It is not one big homogeneous mixture, right? And if we look in here, we can see streaks of butter. That is a very, very good thing. We want those streaks of butter. In fact, when we roll this out, we want to see some good marbling. And that marbling is going to tell us we did our job right. So right now, we're going to wrap this all up into some plastic wrap. We're going to put it out here. We have a cooler with some ice. We're going to stick it in there for a couple of hours. At home, you're going to want to stick this in the refrigerator. You could even stick it in the freezer for at least a couple of hours. Overnight is even better. Okay, we're back, and it's time to roll out our pie dough. All right, so let's get straight to it. We've got our pie dough. We kept it refrigerated, or at least cold. And the whole reason for doing that, we want our pie dough to be nice and solid, and the cold is going to help our butter to stay good and solid. So we're going to cut this in half. Now that's enough for 2 shells, or if you're going to do a pie with a top and a bottom, then it's enough for 1 pie. Okay, so what we're going to do, we just cut this in half. Now we're going to kind of reshape this into a ball, and then we're going to get ready to roll it out. See you back in a minute after I reshape this pie dough. Okay, so we've got our dough formed into a ball, and so now let's start rolling it out. Now when we roll out our dough, there's a little trick that I like to do. Works every single time, and I recommend anybody and everybody to do it. Now normally when people roll out their dough, any kind of dough, they use flour, sprinkle some flour on the board, right? Seems like a pretty normal thing to do. I don't like to do that when I'm doing pie dough. Instead, I just use plastic wrap. So come down here, I've already got it laid out, okay? So what do we got here? I got Linda here helping me to keep everything flat because, you know, wind and outside and everything. So we got 1 sheet of plastic wrap on the bottom, 1 sheet on top. We're gonna sandwich that dough between the plastic wrap, and we're just gonna roll it out. Now here's the thing, okay? Dough does not stick to plastic wrap. And not only will the dough not stick to the plastic wrap, but then when we go to actually transfer the dough into the pan, you'll see how the plastic wrap makes that job a lot easier. All right, now as I roll this out, we're gonna kind of speed through the rolling it out in just a minute. And as I do, one thing that I will just point out really quickly, we're gonna see a lot more of when it's done, is you can kind of see this marbling effect, okay? And that is all that butter in there that we didn't want to fully incorporate into a smooth, uniform dough, right? We wanted to have some of that butter still in pieces. So we're done rolling out our dough, and now it's time to get it into the pan, and you're going to see where that plastic wrap comes in really handy. Now before we do that, I just want to talk about that butter marbling a little bit. Okay, so now let's go look at the dough real quick, and we can see we got some of that marbling in there. Without it, this is all just going to be kind of one solid crust. It's not going to be flaky like you want it to. All right, so let's go ahead and let's transfer this. And now, rather than having to do some crazy thing with picking it up with a rolling pin or whatever, we can just pick it all up with a plastic wrap, bring it over to our pan, and we can press it in with our hand like this without getting anything on our hands. No mess, no fuss, easy cleanup. Man, look at that. I'm seriously, that looks beautiful. That's amazing. And you can see we got all of our cinnamon in there that we put in. So, you know, I'm not sure how much that's going to affect the crust, but we're experimenting and we're going to try it out. And we're going to find out how much it will do. So, there we go. We've got our crust in. Let's actually pull this back a little bit. So we're not going to take out our plastic wrap just yet. We're going to try and pull it into the middle a little bit because we want to keep that in there. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to kind of trim around. And now after we've trimmed, you can kind of see a few areas where it didn't quite get in there. We can go and fill those in. Now that we have our pie crust in the pan, we're ready to do what's called a blind bake. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to fill the pie crust, and then we're going to bake it, but only part way. We're not going to bake it all the way. We're going to do a par bake. So what we're going to want to see is like a light golden brown on the parts of the crust that are exposed, and the rest of it is going to be covered up. Now, you can stick a pie crust in with nothing in it, and you can try baking it, that's fine. But what's going to happen is all that butter is going to make the whole thing just flop, and it's all just going to fall down to the bottom. Okay, so you really need to, when you're going to do a blind bake, you need to have something in the pie. Now, you can definitely put the filling in the pie and bake it like this, but there's a risk of over baking the fruit that's going to be in there, okay, because it's going to take a little bit longer for the crust to bake. And so the closer you can get the crust to being done when you put all the fruit in there, see, we've already cooked all the filling. We're just heating up the filling when we cook this pie. If you have a top shell on it, there's no blind baking. You just have to do the whole thing all together. And so if you're going to do a top shell, make sure that you kind of undercook your apples just a little bit more than you might otherwise. But anyway, so we are going to fill this, and you can buy ceramic baking beads from, you know, an arts and crafts store or baking store, wherever you want, if you really want to. Or you can just do what I'm going to do, and you can use beans. And this is really what a lot of people do. This is what I've always done. Now, these are just, it's just an assortment of kidney beans and lima beans. Some of these have already been used for blind bakes in the past, right? This isn't anything fancy. It's nothing that I'm planning on eating pretty much anytime ever. Okay, and so I just want to fill that up, and I'm going to leave the plastic wrap in there, and I'm going to cover it up with the plastic wrap. Okay, and so when this bakes, this plastic wrap is going to tighten up. Okay, so it's going to tighten up, it's going to melt just a little bit. It's not going to melt so much that it's going to contaminate or get on our crust, but what it's going to do is it's going to tighten up, and then you'll see when this is done baking, all that we're going to have to do is grab the plastic wrap and pull the whole thing out. All the beans will come out all in one. And so this is part of the reason why we want to use a plastic wrap rather than just using flour. Number one, we're avoiding adding more flour and drying out our pie dough, okay? But number two, for convenience and for ease, we are adding something that's going to make our job a lot easier, both putting the pie shell into the pan, as well as taking our beads, our beans, whatever it is that you want to use your shell, taking all that out when we're done with our blind bake. So when we're ready to go and get our pie shell in for its blind bake, then I'll meet you over by the fire, and we've got a special new piece of equipment. Well, here we are by the fire, ready to blind bake our crust, and here is what I bought to do this task. All right, so this is a humongous 20-quart Dutch oven. All right, so we got a bed of coals in our fire pit. This will fit down inside, and then this is just you know, cake pan, and we're gonna put that upside down on the bottom, basically as a bit of a riser, so that we can not have this directly in direct contact with the metal, you know, which is going to get really hot on all those coals. I'm gonna put the lid on there, and we've got some coals and whatnot that we're gonna stick on top. We are just gonna leave this, let it burn, or let it cook rather, for maybe 20 to 30 minutes, and then we're gonna pull all the coals off and check it. Kind of the theory of what we're doing here is we're creating an oven. We have an enclosed metal space, right? We've got a heat source on the bottom and on the sides with the fire pit. We've got heat on the top with all of our coals, and all of that heat together is going to heat up the inside so that our pie crust will bake. And then, you know, when our crust is done, then we're gonna fill it. We'll put the whole pie in there to bake. I gotta come clean with you. This wasn't actually our first idea, and it wasn't our first attempt. We've made this video over the course of a few days, and we tried doing it in, you know, just putting the pie dough inside of a Dutch oven, and just putting the Dutch oven directly in there. I don't do everything perfectly the first time, and yeah, so we had some, you know, I decided that charcoal wasn't the best flavor with apple pie, so we decided to scrap that, and we, you know, we started filming it, and when I saw how it turned out, I was pretty much, yeah, we're not gonna film the rest of that. So we're not really gonna have any footage of that, unfortunately. Oh darn. So we're gonna give this a try. Hopefully this will work out much better, at least in theory. I believe that the theory that we're working with here is much more solid than we had before. There was just no way of controlling that heat with the direct heat from the coals on the Dutch oven. The Dutch oven itself got way too hot. I mean, the center of the crust wasn't even cooked, and the outsides were charcoal. I think like this, we're gonna be able to control our heat a lot better. I had a pretty hard time finding a Dutch oven this big. Out of all the other 20-quart Dutch ovens that I was finding, almost all of them were sold out. I don't know what the deal is with people buying up 20-quart Dutch ovens right now, but apparently it's a thing. We're gonna come back and when we check on this, and we'll see you then.
Ooh, yay.
Oh yeah. Ooh. All right. That looks really good, actually. All right. So it looks like our little oven is working just fine, and you can see, you know, the plastic, it still has all the beans, so that should be pretty easy to pull out. So I'm gonna pull this one out. So this will wrap it up for our pie crust video. Thank you for watching. Please check out the pie filling video. Actually, there's two pie filling videos, sorry. There's an apple pie filling, and then there's another experimental fruit pie filling that we're gonna try and illustrate just the principles of any fruit pie filling. Because if you can do one fruit pie filling, you can do pretty much anything. Give it a try. Try out making a crust. Just make it in your oven. You can see I didn't set my temperature to anything. It's just hot. We're not really looking for a time here. We're looking for a result. And the result is, if you come have a look here, you can see some of those layers separating, right? You can see it starting to get a little bit golden. Now this obviously is not completely done. We don't want it to be completely done yet. We just want it to be par cooked enough for it to hold its shape, for us to put in the apples. This is going to be an apple pie. We're going to get that ready to bake in the last video in this series when we put it all together. Please give this video a like, share it, and if you haven't already, then we would appreciate if you would subscribe to the channel. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks.